I received the divorce papers via email while I was still in the desert. 13 years of marriage were finalized in a PDF attachment. I'm Nathan, a 42-year-old staff sergeant with the 82nd Airborne. I had been in Kandahar for 4 months when Becky decided she was finished with our life together. The subject line read, "Let's be adults about this." The email's body was just 3 sentences long. She had already filed the paperwork, emptied our shared bank account, and moved her new boyfriend, Jeremy, into our house in Spokane. I read the email twice, closed my laptop, went to the communal shower, changed into my uniform, and began my shift without a word to anyone. That night, back in my bunk, I replied with a single word. "Understood." That's all. No arguments, no pleas, and no threats. My bunkmate, Wilson, noticed something was off. "You good, man?" he asked, not looking up from his book. "Yeah," I replied. "Just some things going on back home." He simply nodded. That was the end of the conversation. Military men know when to leave each other alone. Honestly, I wasn't surprised. Things had started to change 6 months before my deployment. Small things. Becky stopped asking about my day. She began working late at the dental office where she was an administrator. She started going to the gym 3 times a week, but never seemed to break a sweat. There were new clothes, new friends I never met, and new passwords on her phone. I didn't confront her or start checking her messages or following her around. That's not my style. But I wasn't oblivious either. So I started taking some precautions, making my own quiet moves. Nothing dramatic, just a few safeguards. I moved important documents to a storage unit across town, my birth certificate, our marriage license, the house deed with only my name on it, thanks to the VA loan, and my military benefits paperwork. I also put my grandfather's watch and my mom's old silver in the same unit, things that held sentimental value. I also opened a separate bank account and started redirecting a portion of my pay there. It was a small enough amount that she wouldn't notice, but it would be a safety net if things went south. The night before my deployment, she hugged me at the airport and said, "Stay safe, okay?" Her eyes were dry, as if she were saying goodbye to a coworker, not her husband heading to war. I should have realized something was wrong then, but a part of me held onto hope. I was wrong. What she didn't know was that I had already prepared for this moment. And what she didn't understand was that I don't start fights, but I always finish them. I met Becky at a friend's barbecue in 2010. I was on leave between tours, staying with my buddy Jason in Spokane. She was finishing nursing school, but ended up taking an admin job at a dental practice, saying it was less stressful. We were married just 8 months later. Becky always said she was proud of my service, although she never really understood it. Her dad was a bank manager, and her brother was a pharmacist. There were no military members in her family. She would ask when I was going to get a real job, not understanding that after 15 years, the Army was my career, not just a job. We bought our house in 2014. It was a simple, 3-bedroom home with a small yard in a quiet neighborhood. My name was the only one on the mortgage because of the VA loan, but I added her to the deed because that's what married people do. They share things. My dad died a year after we got married from a heart attack while shoveling snow. My mom passed away 3 years later from lung cancer, even though she never smoked. They left me some money, not a fortune, but enough for us to pay off her student loans and still have a financial cushion. During our marriage, I was deployed 4 times, twice to Iraq and twice to Afghanistan. Each time I came home, Becky seemed a little more distant and restless, as if she was playing a role she had outgrown. "I didn't sign up to be a military wife," she told me once after I mentioned re-enlisting for another 4 years. "I'm tired of being alone all the time." I understood. But the army was the only place I ever truly felt like I belonged. I was good at my job, and people depended on me. In 2019, things started to shift. At first, it was small. Becky got annoyed when I called during her girls' nights. She started talking about how her friend Melissa had divorced her husband and was now living her best life. She began making comments about how we didn't have anything in common anymore. I suggested we try counseling, but she said we were fine, just going through a phase. Then came the late nights at work, the weekends away with friends I'd never met, the new clothes, and the gym membership she barely used. I should have confronted her, but that's not how I handle things. My dad taught me to think before I speak, and to be certain before I act. So I watched and prepared quietly because my gut told me something was coming. In this life, you learn to trust your gut. 2 weeks after receiving the divorce email, I was in the mess hall when my phone buzzed with a notification from our bank's app. Another withdrawal, $8,500. It was almost all that was left. I put my fork down and opened the app. The joint account balance was down to $212.37. Our savings, the $47,000 we had accumulated over the years, was gone, completely transferred to an account I didn't recognize. Murphy, one of the guys from my unit, glanced over. "Bad news?" I locked my phone. "Nah, just some account stuff." That night, anything. I couldn't sleep that night. I pulled out my laptop and logged into our home security system, which Becky had probably forgotten I could access remotely. The camera showed a strange truck in our driveway. A man I'd never seen before was walking our dog, using my coffee mug, and wearing my Seahawks sweatshirt. And there was Becky, laughing in the kitchen I had renovated myself during my last leave. Something inside me shifted, not anger, but something colder and clearer. I closed the laptop and took out my phone. I made a list. I called James, an army buddy who had become a lawyer. I checked the VA loan terms. I contacted my master sergeant about emergency leave. I reviewed our home refinance documents, something Becky had casually mentioned last year. I checked the security on my military pension accounts. I no longer felt sad or angry. I felt focused, as if I were planning a mission. This wasn't about emotions anymore. It was about strategy. At 0500, before my shift started, I sent an email to James with the subject line, "Need legal help. Discreet and urgent." His reply came an hour later. "Call me. Secure line." Only when I hung up from that call did I know exactly what I needed to do. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to threaten. I didn't even need to confront her. I just needed to wait, watch, and let her own actions become her downfall. 2 months later, I was back on American soil. I didn't tell Becky I was coming home. I didn't call or text. I just checked into a motel in downtown Spokane under a different name and contacted James. We met at a diner 10 miles outside of town. "You look like hell," he said, sliding into the booth. "Feel like it too," I replied. James handed me a folder. "Got everything." We went over the house deed, loan documents, and bank statements. "And this?" he said, pulling out a separate paper. "Found something interesting when I was digging into your finances." It was a refinance application with my signature on it, except it wasn't my signature. Someone had tried to copy it but missed the details. The middle initial was wrong, and the stroke pattern wasn't mine. "Becky did this?" I asked, although I already knew the answer. James nodded. 3 months ago. Used the equity to pull out $30,000. Your signature is required for that since the VA loan is in your name only. Forged my signature, took out a loan against our house, then cleared out our account and divorced me. Busy woman. It gets better. James said. She listed her boyfriend as a co-applicant. He's got a record, 2 DUIs, and a fraud charge from 2019. I took a deep breath. What are my options? Several, James said. But first, you need to decide what you want. I thought about it. I want what's legally mine, and I want her to understand consequences. James smiled. Then here's what we do. The next day, I drove past our house. Her boyfriend's truck was gone, but Becky's car was in the driveway. I parked down the street and watched for a while. I thought about knocking on the door and confronting her, but that wasn't the plan. Instead, I drove to the bank and met with a loan officer who had processed the refinance. I showed him my military ID, the real signature on my driver's license, and the forged documents. His face went pale. I'll need to report this immediately. I understand, I said. I've already filed a police report. That night, I got a text from Becky. Who have you been talking to at the bank? Jeremy said someone was asking questions. I didn't respond. The next day, I went to the county clerk's office and filed paperwork contesting the refinance due to fraud. I registered a formal notice that no changes to the property could be made without my presence. 2 days later, Becky called. I let it go to voicemail. Nathan, we need to talk. The bank called about the house. What are you doing? If this is about the divorce, we can discuss it like adults. The same words from her email. I still didn't respond. James called that afternoon. They froze the refinance money. And there's more. Your wife's boyfriend has been driving your truck, right? The one in your name? Yeah. He got pulled over this morning driving on a suspended license from those DUIs. They impounded the vehicle. Good, I said. He also had some interesting things in the truck. Prescription pads from the dental office where Becky works. They weren't blank. I closed my eyes. She's been stealing prescription pads. Looks that way. The police are investigating. I hung up and sat on the edge of the motel bed. This was getting bigger than I'd expected. A part of me wanted to call Becky and warn her, but then I remembered the security camera footage. My house, my dog, my life, given away like it meant nothing. No. This was the path now. I couldn't turn back, and honestly, I didn't want to. I met with the bank fraud investigator the next morning. His name was Thompson, a short guy with tired eyes and a coffee stain on his tie. This happens more often than you think, he said, spreading documents across his desk. Spouse deploys. Other spouse sees an opportunity. What happens now? I asked. We've frozen the funds from the fraudulent refinance, but there's a problem. Some of the money's already gone. How much? About half. $14,600. I leaned forward. Where did it go? Thompson hesitated. I'm not supposed to share. Carefully, James said. I did some digging into Jeremy Ryan. He has a pattern. He gets involved with women going through divorce or with deployed spouses. I found 3 cases so far. Each time, the woman's home gets sold well below market value to one of Spencer's clients. Ryan gets a cut, then he moves on. And Becky, she knew about this. Hard to say. Maybe she's a victim too. Or maybe she's in on it. I rubbed my face. This wasn't just about Becky betraying me anymore. This was something bigger, something calculated, and other military families had been victims. What do we do? I asked. I've already contacted the FBI's Financial Crimes Division, James said. This crosses state lines, involves military personnel and via loans. They're interested. That night, I sat in my motel room with a beer, thinking about everything, wondering if Becky had been playing me our entire marriage or if she'd gotten swept up in Jeremy's scheme. I wondered if it even mattered. My phone buzzed. Becky again. Nathan, please call me. The bank is saying something about fraud, and Jeremy got arrested for driving your truck. I don't understand what's happening. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed, "Who is Daniel Spencer?" 3 dots appeared as she started typing, then stopped. Started again, stopped. Finally, "I don't know what you're talking about." I wrote, $14,600. Multiple transfers. House listing. There was no response for 10 minutes. Then, "It's not what you think." I turned off my phone and went to bed. The next morning, James called. FBI wants to meet. They've been investigating Ryan and Spencer for months. You're not the first, but you might be the case that breaks it open. For the first time since getting the divorce email, I felt something close to satisfaction. Not because my marriage was over, but because the truth was finally coming out. I met with the FBI agents at their field office in Spokane, Agent Patel and Agent Donovan. They recorded my statement and took copies of all the documents James and I had gathered. Your case helps establish a pattern, Agent Patel explained. Shows intent. Organization makes it a conspiracy rather than isolated incidents. What about Becky? I asked. My wife, ex-wife. The agents exchanged looks. We're still determining her level of involvement, Donovan said carefully. Did she ever mention financial difficulties? Pressure to sell the house? I thought back. She kept saying we were house poor and that we should downsize. I didn't see the need. Our mortgage payments were manageable on my salary. Patel made a note. When did that start? About 6 months ago. Around the time she must have met Jeremy and the refinance, Donovan asked. Never discussed it with me. She forged my signature while I was deployed. They asked more questions and took more notes. When we finished, Patel handed me her card. We'll be in touch. In the meantime, don't confront your wife or Ryan. We need to build this case carefully. I nodded. Understood. That evening, I drove to our neighborhood again and parked down the street from our house. Jeremy's truck was back. He must have gotten it out of impound. Becky's car was gone. My phone buzzed. Text from Becky. We need to talk in person. Meet me at Riverfront Park tomorrow, 11 a.m. by the carousel. I showed the text to James over breakfast the next day. Don't go, he advised. Nothing good can come from talking to her right now. I won't, I said. But I want to know what she's doing today while she thinks I'm meeting her. We drove to our house at 9:30 a.m. and parked across the street. At 9:45, Becky came out, got in her car, and drove away, heading toward Riverfront Park. Now what? James asked. Now we wait, I said. 20 minutes later, a car pulled up with a real estate agent's logo on the door. Daniel Spencer. Jeremy came out to greet him. They talked in the driveway, then went inside. Should we follow them? James asked. I shook my head. No need. I pulled out my phone. I installed security cameras last year, interior and exterior. They upload to cloud storage. James smiled. You didn't mention that before. Never came up, I said, opening the security app and angling the screen so James could see. Spencer and Jeremy were in our living room. Spencer was taking photos, and Jeremy was pointing out features of the house. I turned up the volume. Should list by the end of the week, Spencer was saying. I've got a buyer interested already. Cash offer as usual. How much? Jeremy asked. For 20%, we list at $470,000. They offer $420,000. Everybody's happy. What about the husband? Becky says he's causing trouble. Spencer waved dismissively. Military guys are all the same. They make noise, but they've got deployments, responsibilities. Either way, she agreed to a settlement, full restitution of the stolen funds, forfeiture of any claim to the house or my military pension, and a signed confession about the forgery. In exchange, I didn't press charges. The divorce was finalized 6 months after that email from Kandahar. No fault, clean break, all things considered. On the day the last paperwork was signed, I got a call from Agent Patel. Jeremy Ryan was sentenced today. 8 years for fraud, conspiracy, and identity theft. Spencer got 12. Thought you'd want to know. Thank you, I said. There's something else, she added. We found evidence they'd done this to 11 other military families. Your case helped us build the pattern. Those families might get their money back because of you. After we hung up, I sat on the porch of my rental apartment watching the sunset, thinking about those other families, other men who deployed, thinking their homes and marriages were safe, only to come back to emptiness. I hadn't planned on being the one to bring down Jeremy and Spencer's operation. I just wanted what was mine. But sometimes things work out in ways you don't expect. My phone buzzed. Text from Becky. I never meant for things to end this way. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. A year later, I sold the house. I couldn't stand to live in it anymore. Too many memories. Too much betrayal in those walls. I used the money to buy a small cabin outside of Missoula, Montana. 2 bedrooms, 10 acres of land, a creek running behind it, and no neighbors for miles. I took early